Hello Internet, welcome to the channel. My name's Frankie, and in today's video we are starting a relatively large project within our Christmas mini zoo, and that is a double enclosure, I guess. It's a big diorama type area that is being split into two different enclosures, and today's episode we're going to be focusing on the grey seal. Now, why am I splitting it into two videos? Well, the reason for that is because it is quite a, I guess, a difficult build, something that's quite big for me. I haven't really done something this complicated in a long while, so it is going to take quite a while to actually build it. Now, why is that? It's going to be a nice stony mountain in the rear portion of this habitat, and at the front we're going to have somewhere our guests can obviously view our animals. But both these habitats are going to have aquatic animals in them, or at least semi-aquatic, because it's going to be the grey seals with the king penguins next to them. And that means I would like to have some underwater viewing. And with that in mind, I'm going to be trying to build a whole underground area for our guests to, well, view our animals. But there's also going to be seating areas and a few exhibit animals and loads of education opportunities as well. We're going to make this into a full thing underground. So that is why this video is being split, because that part of the build takes so long by itself that I couldn't really do the seals and the penguins in one video. Instead, in this video, we're going to focus on all the underground infrastructure, which is the underground viewing galleries for both enclosures, and also building the habitat for the grey seal. Now, through the magic of editing, I could cut out loads of footage and make it look as if though this was really quite easy. However, I want to be kind of true to myself and give you guys an accurate representation of how difficult this was. So I'm not going to cut out any of this initial building for the underground area, because it took so long to figure out how to do it properly. I want to show you kind of the full thought process, because there's a lot of bouncing about, there's a lot of going back and forth trying to figure out how to get it all to work the best way that I can. And I think it's kind of useful to see these errors as well as the finished result, because it just gives you a bit more of an understanding of how things are made in art and stuff. Because for those of you that don't know, I have a background in illustration. I'm currently a tattoo artist. I'm a very artistic person, and one of the best ways to learn with art is to do master studies, where you look at somebody that you really look up to and try to recreate what they've done. And you will try and, as you do that, you will learn the little nuances, the little things that they have to do in order to achieve their finished results. By showing you all of the mistakes and all that, you can learn for if you're going to try and attempt to make your own little underground complex thing like this. And I think it turns out looking really nicely, but I will tell you, it's a lot of hassle. It took me ages to figure out how to do this properly. So hopefully by you seeing this, if you attempt it, it will be a bit smoother for you, because you can kind of just not do some of the stuff that I've done. So I started out with placing all of the pathing for this habitat. And the reason for that is because the pathing system in this game is one of the trickiest things to kind of get your head around. So I figured it would be good to get those in first. That would allow me a place to start from where I don't have to then worry about making it all work later. If I get too far into the building process and I realise the paths don't work with what I've built, that'd be super frustrating. So instead I'm going to build around the paths instead, as they are easier to put in. I've also put a glass barrier around the entire perimeter, just so that I can check where the water levels will come up to. And little tip, you can pick up guests and drag them to where you want, and that will kind of show you the height of things that you're building. So I can see where the water comes up to on those guests, and it comes up to just above their head, which are perfect for a viewing gallery for underwater. So we're going to go ahead and start to build this out a little bit. I'm creating a few little kind of, I don't really know what to call them, but little expansive areas from the main underground path, so that those areas can have some seating and exhibit animals, along with a bunch of education boards and whatnot. These areas are really going to be a place that you can kind of chill out. So far this zoo is very much on your feet, so we're designing areas that you can actually sit down and just hang out for a little bit. Now, The pathing here in particular is pretty erratic. It's not tidy at all. I'm just trying to cover as much area as possible, and that is because I'm going to be covering all of this path with some concrete flooring later to make it look nice and tidy, make it all look a bit more uniform, and it will hide just how messy all of this is. I'm just trying to literally cover as much as I can, make sure it all links up and make sure that it's workable for our guests. And speaking of putting those concrete tiles on the floor, that is the next thing I'm going to do. Once I have got all of these areas filled in to the best of my ability, it's time to start trying to cover the ground. And I play about with a few different options, like there are these lovely concrete tiles that have some shapes pressed into them, kind of molded. You've got some shells and some leaves and stuff, and I did play about with the idea of using those as flooring tiles, because I did that in my first big project on this channel, which was the Floki Wildlife Park, Not Quite Little Asia. I don't really count that, mainly just because it got deleted and I feel horrible about it, but all that progress is gone, unfortunately. Yeah, I did that in the entrance to that zoo, to Floki Wildlife Park, so I thought I might give it a go here, but it doesn't work quite as well as I wanted it to, mainly because I'm going to have to rotate these pieces in order to fit them with the glass, and then the pattern won't be repeating and it will just look really obvious. So that's why ultimately I don't go for these really nice sculpted tiles. I also didn't go for the faux rocks either. Whilst I really do want to make this area look like a cave, it does not work as flooring. It would need to be much larger pieces, and I just don't like how it looks. Instead, we're going to use that to texture the walls and maybe some of the roof, but I'm not convinced on that either. And instead we're going to use just some plain concrete floor pieces in order to cover all of the flooring here, and we're just going to change the colour to kind of match the faux rocks. Not exactly match them, it's just a bit of a sandy colour, and I do think it looks quite nice. We're just going to cover as much of the ground as we possibly can with this. And just like I said about the nice sculpted tiles, the reason we can't use those is because you have to change the orientation to match up with the glass as much as possible, and therefore the repeat pattern wouldn't work. Well, with these, because they don't have anything on the surface, you can twist and turn them to really cover as much area as possible, and it works really nicely. One slightly frustrating thing about having done the pathing how I have done it is that placing things like benches, bins and donation bins are quite difficult, because they need to line up with the edge of a path, and I currently can't see them. I can turn on settings so that I can see them, but I kind of forgot that whilst building, annoyingly. I've only just thought about it whilst doing this little voiceover. But it does mean that sometimes you can't place things exactly where you want, which is kind of frustrating, but it didn't cause too much of an issue ultimately. What you can see me doing at the moment is just using various shaped faux rocks to create a perimeter for this underground area, because we want it to look like a cave. So we're going to be making very much cave walls, and it isn't meant to look like a super realistic cave, otherwise we would have textured the floor and whatnot, but instead we're going for the faux look. It's very obviously a fake cave. I was playing about with a pillar there and wasn't overly happy with the results. I do end up creating some pillars using slightly different things later on, but I wasn't overly happy with those hexagonal pieces of faux rock. I'm also popping in an exhibit here, and I had to delete some of the pathing again underneath, because this can't sit on top of pathing, it has to have pathing linking to it, so we needed to make a bit of room for that. And having this exhibit here really did give us quite a creative opportunity, something quite fun to do, which is to try and blend it into the cave as well. And to do that, I'm using different stalactite pieces and sometimes some of the faux tree bits as well, just to kind of make it look as if though this is actually part of the cave as well. We're going to use all these fake rocks and stuff to hide the bits of plastic that you can see on these exhibit boxes and really help to blend it into the surroundings. After this, we're going to place a few of the conservation education boards, because at the moment our education in this zoo is pretty low, just due to the fact that we only have education as far as individual species education goes. Instead, if you place these conservation boards, you're going to get loads of new information, such as general conservation issues like deforestation and the decline in pollinators, the amphibian crisis, things like that. You're going to get a lot more general information for our public that isn't specific to the animals in the zoo and will alert them to a wider range of issues. I'm just going to kind of push these into the walls, make them look like they are part of the surroundings. I'm not going to bother recoloring them or anything. I kind of don't mind how they look in this instance. And as you can see, this is only one small portion of this whole underground area, and it's already taken me quite a while. The main reason that I'm doing all of this now, despite the fact that this is like just a small portion, why am I not doing it more systematically by doing all of the flooring and then all of the surroundings? Well, that's because I wanted to get a general feel for how the end product would look. If I can make one area look how I want it to, I then know exactly what I need to do going forwards, and it's just a bit better than putting in loads of effort across the whole underground area and realising I don't like it. Instead, if I come up with a final design in a small area, I can expand it from there, meaning that we're wasting slightly less time. After playing about with those stalactites on the exhibit box, that gave me the idea to create the pillar that I wanted between the two benches using various stalactites. Using those and turning them upside down and whatnot to create a nice textured kind of pillar. It looks very organic, which I quite like, and it just adds a little bit more interest rather than having these really large open areas in this underground viewing gallery. It's important to have them, to have this space for our guests to walk about and have a look at all of the different education boards and whatnot. But having these pillars will help to break it up a little bit and just make the space a bit more interesting in general. For the underwater viewing gallery, I didn't want to be able to see any sky, so I'm going to be placing these large rectangular aquatic faux rocks to kind of create the border at the bottom of it and then rise it up just above the waterline so that you basically only see underwater. And with that little bit done, I had kind of found exactly what I wanted this underground area to look like. I really like this immersive cave feeling. I quite like that all the colours are fairly similar, and it just, I don't know, there's something about it that I really like. So with that, I'm going to start kind of fleshing out the rest of this area. And just for a little bit of context, this took just under an hour to kind of do this one small area and carve out the basic shape of the whole underground viewing gallery. So from here, it is a matter of replicating what we've already done and making it look a little pretty by using signs and stuff, and then we will move on to the actual habitat for animals. Now there is a bunch more footage of this underground building, so I'm going to pop that into time-lapse for you. I'm going to stop talking for a little bit, and it is kind of just what we've been doing, but with a whole bunch of decorating as well. And then I'll come back in a couple minutes to talk about the main habitat build, which is of course for the adorable grey seals. So I'll see you in a minute. Now the very first thing that I do for the building of this habitat is to place this aquatic nature scene, which I found whilst playing about with the aquatic rocks and stuff, and it's just beautiful. I thought, why not use it? I mean, this is a mini zoo, we're trying to get it completed this month. We're going to use as many blueprints as we can, basically. So I'm going to use this as the main shelter for our animals because it is lovely and it is the original colour of the faux rocks, which is exactly what I plan on using for the majority of these habitats to create that nice panoramic mountain kind of feel that we're going for. Now behind these we're going to place a basic staff room and a zookeeper hut just to ensure that our keepers can get to this habitat without having to walk miles, because it is currently a little bit far from the staff village that we created earlier in the series, and we're going to hide these using various bits of faux rock and stuff. This little staff facility is going to be hidden within the mountain, and obviously to power that we're going to place a little generator, and that is also going to power all of the education boards and stuff that is in the underground viewing area, which is amazing. And because of all of that water that we've got as well, we're going to be placing a water treatment station up here as well. Up until this point, it is still kind of difficult to see this whole area as being a functioning habitat because it just does not look like one. Well, this next step is what takes it from being just an empty area of land and being something truly quite wonderful, which I am quite proud of. And what we're doing right now is basically just working on loads of faux rock placement. I'm even creating a little set of stairs, which ultimately is useless because the seagulls won't go up this. They have incredibly large hitboxes for such small animals. They just can't seem to get through areas without colliding with something. So I end up having to delete a few different rocks and stuff from this blueprint in order to make sure the animals can get in there and use it as a shelter. Because otherwise they can't even access the rest of their habitat. So this little staircase is just a pretty little thing I made. We're going to use basically all the faux rocks that we have at our disposal in order to flesh out this habitat. We're using these large pillar-like ones to begin with just to kind of shape the habitat because they are the best for creating a general shape, and then you can use the other ones with loads more cracks in them and stuff to really start to add a bunch of texture and variation to the surfaces that you're putting in this habitat. I'm also going to create a nice little slope coming down from the other entrance to this this shelter. I'm using some large faux rocks for that, but I like the idea of the seals kind of sliding down on their belly in order to get into the water. They're not going to do that obviously, but I think it would be really cute if they could. And of course, as this habitat has a custom barrier, we're going to be using a null barrier inside of it in order to make sure that this habitat does register as a functioning habitat, somewhere that our animals can be kept in and our keepers will visit and make sure that the animals are well fed and cleaned. When I first came up with the idea of doing a large panoramic kind of habitat that was going to be split into two, having seals in one and then penguins in the other, I did play about with the idea of having them actually join each other, have it be one massive habitat. But in the end, I have decided to kind of bridge that gap, make sure that it's blocked up and that the animals can't cross over. Yeah, it's not going to be a shared habitat between the two, mainly because they don't normally live alongside each other and I don't really want to kind of get in the way of that. But also I do have a little bit of experience with king penguins and they mate like crazy. Back in Floki Wildlife Park there ended up being hundreds of them from just 10 originally within like the first year, and I feel like as a seal that would get quite annoying, suddenly having that many roommates. I think it would get pretty crowded, so keeping them all in one space is going to be a bit better for the seals, and it's also going to be a bit more manageable I think just in general. So we're going to go ahead and make sure that area is kind of blocked up using different faux rocks and stuff, just as we're building the rest of the habitat, just to make sure the animals can't cross over into each other's habitats. Placing the habitat gate is the same as with any of these faux rock wall kind of habitats. I'm just going to place it at random and then delete some rocks and move others about just to make sure the entrance is kind of flush, make sure there aren't any gaps. and then it's a matter of opening up this sleeping area a little bit and blocking off the back, because I didn't realise there was a hole in it for some reason. This is just going to ensure that our animals can't escape out the back and that they have a hard shelter somewhere to sleep. Now it's time to get the grey seals in and see how they like the habitat, and this is where I discover that they can barely move. They just can't get out of that initial sleeping area, so we're going to have to make a bunch of adjustments, delete some rocks, open it up a little bit and make sure that it's as movable as possible for our animals to really enjoy this habitat. Now when it comes to the enrichment items, there's not much that we need to worry about. Food enrichment wise, there's only the frozen fish ice block, and we can keep that inside the sleeping area, and then we can place an underwater fish feeder to make sure that they have a live experience when feeding, and the rest is just toys, so they can go literally anywhere in the habitat. For plant life, there's not really much I can do, both because of the coverage that they allow and because most of this habitat is made of rock and there's not really any places to put much plant life. So we're going to focus on this tiny little island that we made, and we're going to place a bunch of underwater foliage as well. I don't normally place that much underwater plants, but I think it's going to look lovely having that viewing gallery right there, being able to see all these different colours and textures as well, because otherwise it's just smooth dirt and it doesn't look quite as good. Having all of this foliage as well really helps to bring it to life, and I'm really happy with how it looks. Now this is the last step for this habitat, so we're going to move on to our cinematics in just a moment and have a bit of a grand reveal. But before we do that, I would just like to thank you so much for having watched this video. If you enjoyed it, consider giving it a thumbs up and let me know what you'd like to see me do on the channel in the future in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, I will see you later.
Sizowakha, ukula zashaka, sizona selapha thina sizowakha.